What lies behind Arron Banks, the self-styled bad boy of Brexit? He's big on Britain, but he's in trouble, suspected of routing a multi-million-pound donation to Leave.EU through the Isle of Man. He's a bosom pal of Nigel Farage and was a big donor to UKIP. He and his Bezzy mate Andy Wigmore like to hang out at the Russian embassy with the men who have snow on their boots. So, is he a true Brit? Or, as his critics say, a stooge for someone else's money? Finding the answer to that question now is in the hands of the National Crime Agency. They've been asked by the Electoral Commission to find the source of Banks's £6 million loan to Leave.EU. He makes out that he's a very rich man. Or is he? Last year he was in the Sunday Times rich list, but this year he didn't make the cut. He's often described as the biggest donor in British political history, but he didn't actually give millions. The dosh was registered as loans. 2 years ago, Electoral Commission records showed that Arron Banks had loaned £6 million to Leave.EU. An Electoral Commission investigation this year reported that Banks had in fact directed his company, Rock Services, to loan money to Leave.EU. This was done, apparently, via another Banks company, Better for the Country Limited. Now the Electoral Commission says it suspects that the money didn't come from Rock Services Limited, but from yet another Banks company, Rock Holdings Limited. The problem with that is Rock Holdings Limited is not based in the United Kingdom, but the Isle of Man. That makes it an offshore donation, and that is not allowed.
If Mr. Banks is now saying, look, I was the original source of all of this money, me personally, and I'm entitled to donate money under the legislation because I'm a registered voter in this country. The question is, why cover up him as the original source of the money by channeling the money, or apparently channeling the money, through other entities? It just doesn't make sense. So he'll have to come up with an explanation for that.
What did Mr. Banks tell Parliament?
Rock Services I lent the money to the company, but the money was delivered by Rock Services.
Unfortunately for Mr. Banks, this forensic accountant, who makes no secret of his Remainer sympathies, took a look at the books. Do those accounts show a £6 million loan in the books of Rock Services, Capbrain Lane, Bristol?
No.
So where does this money come from?
Well, apparently, according to the Electoral Commission's investigation, it comes from Rock Holdings. The company, which is the parent of Rock Services, was the source of the funds.
Do the accounts of this Isle of Man company show the loan?
We don't know, because Isle of Man has very strict secrecy rules around its accounts, so it's not possible for those to be publicly available.
For his part, Mr. Banks says that he took advice from a QC, and he will explain all on Sunday's Andrew Marr show. In a democracy, the source of political money should be clear to the voters. That's the law. If the Electoral Commission's suspicions prove to be correct, it's hard to see how that squares with a multi-million-pound loan from a company based in a secrecy jurisdiction like the Isle of Man. Mr. Banks has a lot of questions to answer.
John Sweeney there. Leave.EU was founded by Arron Banks in 2015 with the businessman and founder of Leave Means Leave, Richard Tice. Earlier today, I spoke to Mr. Tice, the first time he's spoken since yesterday's news, in fact. I started by asking him just how much money Mr. Banks had loaned to the campaign and where it had come from.
Well, look, Arron Banks has made a declaration to the Electoral Commission about all of the money that was put into Leave.EU, and I'm not here to defend where it came from. He will do that with the authorities quite properly. The real issue, though, is let's just look at who's making these allegations. Okay, the Electoral Commission, because this is really important. Their track record in the last 6 months, twice, they have been criticised heavily by the High Court of our country, firstly for misleading High Court judges in respect of another Leave organisation, and then secondly for misinterpreting their own rules. So if they can't interpret their own rules, what chance, frankly, has anybody else got?
When you look at, and we, like many other journalists, have tried to trace this credit line that was extended to Leave.EU through Arron Banks' various companies. You know, he's got Rock Services, he's got Rock Holdings, he's got Better for the Country. I mean, what does that look like to you as someone in the finance business?
The reality is, I'm not here to defend him. He will answer the allegations made by the Electoral Commission to the NCA. Let's hope they do that job quickly, because frankly the NCA have got more important things to be focused on. What I'm focused on is that this organisation that has made these allegations has got a really bad track record of doing so, and it's important that people remember that before they draw the wrong conclusions about what has gone on. And let's also remember...
Well, we're not drawing any conclusions.
People are making some
but
very... You only have to look on social media. You only have to look at what members of Parliament are saying. No,
they're saying there's a case to answer.
Members of Parliament have immediately jumped on this and said, we've got to pause Brexit. We've got to use this as an excuse to extend Article 50. We on the Leave side know what's going on. This is part of the Ramonas who are looking for excuses to extend Article 50, and this is a very convenient additional part of it.
Would it trouble you if these inquiries were to demonstrate that some of this money ultimately had come from Russia?
Well, let's just remember about Russia, okay? Right. Russia has shown itself to be behaving absolutely appallingly. When these allegations were made in 2015, Vince Cable, George Osborne were encouraging business people to do business with Russians. City grandees, city investment banks were launching companies, Russian companies, on the stock exchange. Let's just remember, things have moved on very quickly, but at the time, we were being encouraged as business people, as entrepreneurs, to do business with Russians.
Well, Russia was also, in a national sense, supportive of Brexit as a concept. They like the idea.
Look, who knows?
Do you have any regrets, sitting here now as we are discussing this issue, with the matter being referred to the National Crime Agency, about your association with Arron Banks in this venture?
I have no regrets whatsoever about being involved in the most successful democratic expression of the will of the people this country has ever seen. The only regret I have is that people in the establishment will not accept that will, and they are still trying to stop it. And in my view, this is another part of that process. And my regret is that the body supposedly set up to independently oversee democracy in this country has already been shown to be not independent and frankly incompetent, to have been subject to those accusations and criticisms from the High Court.
We're giving you a chance also to reaffirm your friendship or belief in Arron Banks, and you're not doing so. I find that curious under these circumstances.
Look, there's nothing curious about it at all. I worked for one of the two Leave organisations.
Co-founded.
Yeah, correct. And I'm very proud of what we achieved because, we won, let's not forget that, and we won legitimately. And what's happening here is that people just will not accept that. And, I haven't been involved with Leave.EU ever since the referendum. I'm very proud of what we've set up and what we're doing now to ensure the will of the people is not betrayed and that Brexit is properly delivered.
Thank you very much. Richard Tice there. Now, while the question of whether or not there was any wrongdoing is one thing, the issue of whether or not any alleged wrongdoing might render the Brexit result invalid is another. The Deputy Leader of the Labour Party, Tom Watson, joins us now from Bewdley in Worcestershire. Tom Watson, are you one of those people Richard Tice is talking about that just wants to use this as a way of frustrating the will of the British people?
No, the reason why I think this inquiry is so important is if there has been wrongdoing, and this inquiry will establish the facts of that, then we need to make sure that it's never allowed to happen again, whether to be a future referendum or indeed a future election. And of course, it's taken a very long time for us to get to this point where the NCA have confirmed there's an inquiry. There are only limits to how much journalism can reveal on this. The work of John Sweeney in his report, or Carol Cadwallader over the last 12 months, has been very important. But if you've got people like Arron Banks who essentially mocked the parliamentary inquiry that tried to get to the facts, the only people that really can get to the truth of this are the National Crime Agency or one of those bodies that can follow the money, gather the evidence, and interview people under caution. And that's why I think this week's decision was so significant.
So if I understand you right, you want the investigation to proceed. You've also called for an American Mueller-style wider inquiry, but you don't think the result itself of the Brexit referendum should either be suspended while these inquiries go on, or rerun, or anything like that?
Well, no, I mean, those forces were unleashed by that referendum. You can't really get that back into the bottle. I do think it's not unreasonable for people to ask how long the inquiry will take. There are people out there who I think would want to know before the Brexit negotiations have concluded what happened in that inquiry. But the real reason we need to do this, other than to show whether there was wrongdoing or not and to bring people to justice if there was, is so that we can ensure that our democracy is in good order. I mean, we don't want there to have been wrongdoing taking place that's not put right in future elections or referenda.
But you're saying you don't want people to get away with wrongdoing, but at the same time, if I understand you, you're not aligning with David Lammy or some of the other MPs in your party who said, if necessary, halt the Brexit process while these inquiries are made.
I think it would be very difficult to do that. Although I do think the NCA or the government should outline how long they think this inquiry will take, because people do, there is rightly, people are frustrated out there that it's taken so long to get to this point. I think the Met need to explain why, when the Electoral Commission told them the evidence was available to collect, it took them many months to actually go and get the information from their office. I also think there are other questions to answer slightly unrelated directly to this inquiry. There was an allegation in the Daily Mail today that one of the security services requested of Theresa May the right to investigate Arron Banks in 2016, and the allegation was that the then Home Secretary Theresa May turned that down.
There doesn't seem to be any hard evidence on that.
I think she should confirm or deny whether that took place.
Yeah, there doesn't seem to be.
There's no evidence. There's the allegation. There are these allegations made, and Theresa May will know whether she was asked or not, and she will be able to confirm or deny whether that's the case. And I think it's not unreasonable for people to ask her to answer that question.
In terms of the things we already know about, the accusations about data harvesting and now these potential irregularities in the financing of it, are these things you've discussed with Jeremy Corbyn? Do you think he cares about this?
I've discussed it very in brief terms with Jeremy. He says we need to get to the facts as well. Indeed, he's publicly said that. I've taken an interest in this because in my policy lead, I'm responsible for the data protection policy and therefore look at the work of the ICO. And
would you like to see him more energised, though, on this issue, and the party generally more energised? Because you're something of a lonely voice there near the top of the party.
I'm not lonely at all. In fact, as Deputy Leader, I think I could come on Newsnight and interrupt a social evening because it's so important. And I think Jeremy's very happy with me coming on Newsnight talking about it. But I think the implication in your question is that we don't take these allegations seriously.
Well, no, I think he's also thinking about all those many Labour supporters who voted for Brexit, presumably. He's also thinking about them and how they might react to this.
Well, those people who voted Brexit, whether they were Labour supporters or not, would want to establish whether crimes were committed or regulations broken. This is just about getting to the facts. There have been allegations that money that was inappropriate was used in the referendum. There have been allegations of breaches of data laws. Some of the allegations involve other jurisdictions that go beyond the capacity of the Electoral Commission to investigate. And therefore, for nearly a year now, people have been calling with increasing alarm for the appropriate agency with the powers to follow the money, to go abroad if needs be, to talk to other agencies, to coordinate the various bodies that have got a stake in getting to the facts, to get this done. And the National Crime Agency is the thing to do that. I think they need to tell us how long it's going to take. I think Theresa May needs to answer what her role was. And I think there's a public and national interest in getting to the truth so that we can make sure that our democracy is safe and robust.
I'm sorry, I've got to cut you short there. Thank you for interrupting your social evening. We'll see where the NCA NCA gets with this. Thank you very much.